But yeah, it's about an Olympic or ex-Olympic skier who suffers a pretty bad injury and is rode back to maybe a possible comeback for the 2022 Olympics. So that's basically the story there. I'll leave the rest for you guys to watch.
I have to say, I watched it last night and found myself laughing throughout it. So
Good, good. I'm glad. It is. It's definitely something, again, people watch who may not be connected with it. And for the first 5 minutes, if you're watching documentaries, be like, okay, this is a documentary. And then, wait, it can't be.
I watched it too, and I thought it was great. And it was actually for a documentary, it was so believable because I know people like that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like at first I wasn't aware it was a mockumentary because I wasn't paying attention, and then as you get into it, it's like well, okay, well I do know people with a whole bunch of what the my film. The artist actually had 9 wives,
Oh
so
my
it's
God.
like okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was really well done what you put together.
Thank you. Yeah, and well, it was really helpful too because all the actors, um, I grew up with one or two of them, and one's a comedian, and the other actors I've worked with over 10 years or whatever when I started acting, and I started acting in Prague, but then back in New York City. So we had this kind of like I wrote each character for the actor, so it was sort of their alter ego. So it sort of worked, and it was kind of believable. So everyone did a great job. But it was just a ball to make. We were just laughing in between takes and improvising, and just if somebody had an idea, it's like, yeah, let's go with that. And keep interviewing, and then picking the best scripted dialogue and the improvised dialogue, and then kind of piece together the whole mockumentary. And the difficulty was when it was all finished, I had 16 or 17 interviews and no stock footage or ski footage. So I had to, Sarah, who played the surfer, her good friend, Alina, worked for a big stock footage company in LA and gave us this huge discount. So I did a bunch of research and found all that crazy footage of the helicopters. And at first I was going to do the skiing. I grew up skiing, but SAG was not into that. I needed a stunt coordinator and all this. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't think we could do that.
I wondered if all that was you or not.
So all the, it's funny. So I had to find, like, I had my dad go through old photos of me skiing to like make it believable, to like piece it together. And then John, our other editor, did all the photoshops as we went along. So it's like, there'd be one of actually me, and then like me in the like jumpsuit, which was fake, and then but it all kind of blended together in the end. So it's a lot of work making a mockumentary. I can't imagine an entire documentary. But yeah.
Who else? Lisa, do you want to
Oh,
introduce yourself and your film?
yeah, and I know you guys had mine under the native cinema category, and but it is a documentary, and I did watch a good number of the documentaries yesterday. Just wanted to meet some people, but yeah, Earl is a Native American artist, really well known. Um, I knew him when he was alive in Aspen, and along with a bunch of skiers, Brian, that were like what you were portraying, but yeah, his work's held in high esteem, and Crow on the Crow Reservation, so it involves the Crow culture, how important that is in his painting. It involves how the contemporary Native art movement began in Santa Fe at Institute of American Indian Art. So there's some history in there, but it gets. I tried to use as much B-roll as I could to keep it uh, engaging, and I think that worked. The people that we interviewed just loved the guy, including we had a couple of his ex-wives in there, and he would get in trouble a lot because he partied a lot. So the sheriff of Aspen is in it, But he was like I don't know if you've heard of Bob Broadus. He's was known as a compassionate sheriff that would protect creative freaks like Hunter S. Thompson, the Gonzo journalist, was a friend of Earl Biss, and he would try to keep them out of trouble as much as possible. But he'd have to draw a line, and sometimes, yeah, Earl would end up in jail sometimes because he didn't know boundaries, and it worked in his art because he didn't know any boundaries. But in his life, sometimes that would come back and get him. but there's a lot of heart in it because of the interviews, the things. And I saved the interviews from his family at Crow Reservation last. Well, not all of them, but to get to the heart of it, like what he meant to them, because he was like a messenger for their culture. And Kevin Red Star is in it, who is also a prominent Crow artist, and he pulls the story together quite a bit. And I got to say, it's been an honor to put this story out. It started with a biography, a book, because Earl asked me to write a book, and then led to this. And it took a lot of time. Yes, Brian, it took a long time. But
And it's a feature, right? I haven't seen anything yet. Oh my God. Yeah, I can't imagine. It's just like finding all the footage and making the flow work,
Yeah, but it kind of, I had an idea of the structure of it, but it was also dependent on things that came out in interviews would drive what some of the B-roll would be in the way it came together and the way the story was strung together. And I took my time and just, instead of, it was micro budget. So the art dealer who has copyrights to his art, whenever they'd have a BIS show or a book signed of mine and they had all the art up, that's when we'd go shoot because it was already up. And then we would coordinate interviews with people who lived in those towns. So yeah, we shot in 4 states, counting the Buffalo and Kansas and the all of these things that just worked out. I grew up in a little town called Medicine Lodge, and every 3 years they put on this big peace treaty pageant, the reenactment of history from wildflower days up, and they have covered wagons and they reenact the whole thing. So I went and got good covered wagon footage and cavalry footage that went in when they're talking about the transition between the migrant ways and when the Europeans came. And it just worked out. I didn't force it. I didn't say, oh my gosh, where am I going to find buffalo? I was over there with my dad, and he says, well, there's some buffalo on the Z-Bar Ranch. We'll just I'll just talk to Thane and we'll get it. It just came together nicely, but it did take 2 years. But fortunately, we shot it before the virus started, and all the editing happened that year. And it was a learning curve for me. I had a professional consultant, but a lot of it I hadn't done before. I had to learn it as I went. I was the Google queen on tutorials.
I can relate to that because
yeah.
COVID hit, and then I had an editor who was going to edit the whole thing, and then I was stuck here. So I had to learn Premiere from the first tutorial and then all the way to, so I know what that's about too.
Ryan, I got to say, in those shots where they had you against that wall, your eyes were just electric. You really had the character. I mean, I really thought you were, because I wasn't paying attention when I first hit it. I thought you were a bummed out skier. And I thought, well, this crew's going to have a handful with this guy. And then I realized later, you're a good actor.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Unbelievable actor.
That was in part, the DP in New York, we settled on that location because it looked like a ski lodge, the back. And the colors, it was all natural light, which was kind of cool.
It was good. Yeah.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Geedra, morning. Where are you calling in from, Geedra? Oh, you're muted. You're muted. There you are.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Yeah, actually, at the moment, I'm in Moscow.
Yeah, so because they were talking about archival footage, and you had a lot of archival footage. How did? Why don't you introduce yourself in your film, and then talk a little about where you came up with the idea, or the subject, how you got involved in that.
Okay, yeah. So I am Giedrė Žickytė. I am, one second, I'm Lithuanian. I'm from Lithuania and temporarily now living in Moscow for some reasons. And my film is called The Jump, and it's about a sailor. It's a Cold War story about a man who jumped from the Soviet ship onto American ship, and he was returned back to the Soviets. So that was like the story. Actually, I heard about it when I was in the United States myself. In LA, I was screening my previous film when my friend, local Lithuanian American, he told me, have you heard about a guy who once, like in 1970s, jumped from ship to ship? And actually this image of a man, of this tiny human figure in between like two ships, two countries like Soviet Union, United States, Cold War, two superpowers. I was really like very touched by this thing. And when I started doing research, and actually the more research I did, and the more I found, I realized that it's like, sometimes we say stranger than fiction, or it cannot happen in reality. So for me, this story was really like that. I mean, because this was only the beginning, that he was returned back to Americans, and what happened to his fate later, and how all society was involved, and all the twists and turns in his, I just don't know how to tell, not to not to open too much. Like, even for example, when we were editing the trailer, it was so hard because we also wanted just to have like the beginning of the story and not to show too much, and not to show some things from what happened later. Even for me, my best part is when he finally came to United States. So yeah, so, and I worked many years on this film, and I also traveled to United States, and I get to know, thanks to this film, I get to know a little bit also American people, and I've been editing also very long time. And yeah, and about the archives, yeah, there was a question because I did a really lot of work on archives, and I learned two things from working on it, because we have like many great archives from 70s that were covering the incident, covering the story, and covering the character, and that was like amazing thing, that you cannot repeat. You can see him 50 years ago, how he looked like, and how people accepted, how responded, what impact it did here, because there was massive demonstrations everywhere around the United States about President Nixon was involved. And I think it was the only time, because the film starts when President Nixon goes into the conference and we ask him, what about this Lithuanian who was beaten on the Coast Guard? And I think maybe that was the only time in history when he heard this question about Lithuanian, about a man from this small nation that was occupied by Soviet Union somewhere near the Baltic Sea. So many, many things. And what I learned with two things. First, I think never take no as an answer, because you can call some person one day, whatever. Because I found like I was going through the newspapers, and like, oh, Simas was like in Boston, and then local television was filming how he received like a honorary medal or whatever from the city mayor. No, all these facts. Okay, so maybe there is some material, maybe there is. So it was like a kind of detective work. And then I try to find material, and we say, no, nothing exists. But if you come next day and there is another person working that has maybe more willingness to help you, well, yeah, oh, okay, maybe there is something. I can try to find it. So, and you can get this material. So this is I really learned. Always ask twice and never take no as an answer. And the second thing what I learned, that archives in the United States are crazy expensive. Actually, everything in United States is so expensive because when I was shooting, I mean, everywhere you go, you need to pay. I had this feeling all the time, even for parking, you know, like to compare with my country. But the archives, the prices were like, and you know, you cannot, it was, I think I'm not afraid to do any, for me now, any other movie will not be expensive after this movie after. And to finish, and I used like a film clip with the fiction of Simas Kudirka that was made in 1978 about the life story of my character, a fiction movie starring Alan Arkin, and this film won like few Emmys, and it was like an American interpretation of the story, and I needed it for the film because my character was watching some episodes, he was reflecting on the story, how it happened. And we cleared the rights. And when I was editing with a very low quality copy that I whatever found from VHS, DVD, very, very low. So we finally cleared the rights, paid like enormous amount of money. And I said, okay, now can we get like this good footage now to replace now for edit? And we say, yeah, but it's an old film. We don't have the film. Oh, so what I'm going to have, you know, like such a poor quality. That was like, and then I remembered when I was shooting the children that were writing letters to my film character, one of them was showing DVD to the character. And I thought, okay, if there is like a DVD 10 years ago released, there must be somewhere masters. It has to be somewhere. We had to release it from somewhere. And I started digging more and more, and I found in eBay 16mm reels of this original movie for $300. So I ordered it. It came here to Lithuania. We scanned, and I had like a perfect 4K copy image material. So I have now like reels of original movie at home. So that's the story about the archives. Like never give up and search until everything you can search.
Scott, do you want to talk a little about your film and anything?
Sorry?
I was asking Scott if he wanted to talk about his film.
Sure. Yeah. I don't have the patience for that amount of archival searching and digging. So I just go out in the mountains and shoot stuff. So I did with Spirit, and yeah, it just kind of came about as an accident, really. I was connected with these adventure racers for a while. I've shot a lot of adventure races over the years, just domestically, a little bit internationally, and was connected with a number of racers. And these racers are out in Oregon by me. They're a couple hours away. And so I'd shot them before and shot some of the races that they put on, and they were going down to do this big race in Patagonia that they've done a number of times. And they were looking for some media folks to just kind of cover the race. And, you know, they worked with me. And so I got involved in that. And with Chelsea, I, you know, knew enough about her journey with her pregnancy and losing one of the twins in birth, and about that story. I knew that she was very inspiring and very open about it with other people. And it was always kind of a story that I was interested in helping her tell to a greater audience. And so things just kind of lined up where I was going to go down Patagonia to film this race, and knew that would kind of be a great vehicle for telling her personal journey as well. So I kind of just approached her and said, like, hey, I'm going down there to shoot the race, but what if we also kind of shot it with this greater film in mind? But I mean, really, it's mostly an event documentary. So I mean, I had no idea if I was going to get anything out of it. It might just have turned into a 5-minute race coverage video, but I was really hoping to get something more out of it. So yeah, we went down there and shot it, and just things aligned that I was able to get enough footage, not as much as I would like, but it's Patagonia and it's a race. So things happen. So yeah, it just, I mean, it was all in the back of Chelsea just being so open and generous with her story, and just being there alongside them with a race allowed me to kind of just dig into that deeply enough to hopefully make it cathartic and hopeful in the end.
I bawled, Scott. I bawled a lot.
That's what I like to hear.
Well, two of my sisters were pregnant at the same time and due 5 days apart. And one of them lost her baby on Christmas and she was 38 weeks. And so, a week later, the other one got to deliver. And so it was, as soon as it started and they named I realized the baby's name was Spirit, I was just like, whoa. But I thought you did a phenomenal job. It was very moving and I really, really liked it.
That's great. Thank you. And I mean, that's one of the best parts about it is just like a lot of people with stories like that have just approached Chelsea or approached me, and just, not a lot of people are talking about it in the way that she's talking about it. And I mean, I understand why I wouldn't. I mean, it's the way she goes about it is just really, I mean, that's kind of what got me through editing it for so long, was just like, oh, damn, if she can put it out there, then like, I just gotta stick with it and do it justice. So
I thought she was so brave. I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah. And I mean, the ending of the film, which I guess I won't spoil if you haven't seen it, but I mean, I had no idea that it was going to end that way and that things would end happily like that. So, I mean, that's just kind of the joy of documentary filmmaking. It was like, could have been nothing, but in the end, turned out to be something special for me at least. So.
Lynn, do you want to talk about your film and process?
Sure. My film is a documentary short called Eddie's World. And it's about my father who, when we released the film, was 98. He's now 99. And he's a toy inventor. And he, well, actually, hold on one moment. I will show you. I should have had my props, but he invented the chattering teeth. And he's and many other toys. I mean, he spent his life as an independent toy inventor. And I started the film really as a family legacy project. I was a little bit burned out after my previous film, which was archival, and I raised a lot of money, and it was like doing the distribution. All of that was like, I don't know if I want to make another film again. And so I was like, I'll just, start interviewing my father, because I was like, I mean, what was interesting to me is I've made film stories about other people, and I really never thought about making a film about my own family, even though it's totally logical now. And so I just said, I'll just start doing some interviews with my father. And the moment he opened his mouth on camera, I realized I had a film, and so then I just started shifting, between doing this family legacy project, getting a lot of the interviews done, and then making it into a film. And I actually have an eBay archival footage, similar kind of story. So my dad surprisingly has very few archives, archival material. And because we tried, we have a lot of the toys, but what really works in the film, when you see it, is the commercials and, the older commercials. And so we were finding them on YouTube, and they were like terrible quality. And I was trying to, even if I had to pay something, I was willing to do it, because the quality was so bad. And I was looking for several of the commercials, and I talked to a friend of mine who's, he's not an archivist, but he's, very much involved in the, archival community. And he said, well, I think I saw someone selling the commercial on eBay. And it was just so random. And I ended up being able to buy, a 16 millimeter copy of the Kerplunk commercial, which, you know, was really great. You know, it was a great find. So, but one of the things about, I mean, a couple of things about the film. I mean, I started it really because I was interested in my father aging, you know, because when you see the film, at 98 is like working in his garage machine shop. He's very, you know, precise, and he's always working. I mean, probably the biggest challenge in the film was getting him to agree to not say I'm too busy for us to come over and film. And so I was very interested in his aging process, especially because my mother had died several years ago. And I kind of watched him go from a grieving spouse to kind of re-energize, bringing life back to himself by walking, you know, and he's, you know, started walking every day and, you know, brought himself back to health. And so that's kind of you know, what interested me as much as the toys in the beginning. And so I feel I was kind of able to tell both of these stories within the arc of a short film. It's only 18 minutes, but and then I'm really thrilled to be at, you know, Durango and to be as part of a film festival, because even though we are now on we're streaming, you know, it's just on YouTube and through the New Yorker. It's just really nice to be able to talk about the film and show the film within the context. And I really, you know, like the program that we're part of, Many Paths. So I really appreciate this opportunity.
Thanks. Jonathan, you want to talk about your film a little?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So the film is called Almost an Island. It's just under an hour, and it's about an Inupiaq family in northwestern Alaska. And I've never heard people up there refer to themselves as Inuit. I always hear their own term for themselves, which is Inupiaq. But for the rest of the world, they would be considered as Inuit people, meaning, you know, indigenous from the far north, basically. And the film is about this one family, and it really follows this central patriarch who's in his late 70s, now 80s, named Elmer Goodwin. And I grew up in Alaska, and when I was growing up, and I only really realized this later, I look back and all of my friends were Native, Tlingit and Haida. I grew up with them. We went to school, and it might sound strange to hear me say, well, I realized that later. But at the time, my friends didn't say, you know, when we were doing things, well, as a Tlingit or as a Haida, you know, we were kids playing. And they didn't talk about their identity. So many years later, I'm in my, you know, 40s, and I met this man named Elmer. I was working on a planetarium show that I was hired to make for the University of Alaska, and it was about how the Native Alaskans view the Northern Lights, like what it means from within their culture. And Elmer was one of the local indigenous people that the university, you know, basically got his agreement to be interviewed about that. And it was in that context where he and I were chatting, and he said that he had always wanted to write a book about his life. And that kind of stuck with me, and I got home to where I live, strangely now in the desert in Tucson, Arizona, which I still can't believe, even though I've been here for 20 years. I just kept up thinking about Elmer, and I sent him an email one day, and I asked, well, what if instead of a book, we make a documentary? And so that led to me going up to where he lived and living with his family 8 or 9 different times over the course of 4 years. And it's very expensive to get up there. The first time I went up, it rained for all 3 weeks that I was there. I only had one day where I could actually shoot outside. So I was able to go back again, at different times of the year. And, I wanted it to be a film that was made from within the culture, not from the outside. So I didn't want to show up and ask very naive questions like, do you hunt whales? Do you hunt seals? What does this mean for your culture? I didn't want it to be that kind of film. And so a lot of the time, Elmer, we would wake up in his remote camp and he would ask me, well, what do you want to film today? And I was always really reluctant to say anything because I didn't want to form the activities. I didn't want to force us into a certain area. And so I would just kind of act kind of dumb and quiet. And then at a certain point, he would say, well, okay, let's just go catch some salmon and we might as well smoke them, huh? And I'd be like, sure. And so he would actually put me to work where I would be catching the salmon. And if I picked up my camera, he would be like, come on, there's not time for that. We gotta catch these salmon and smoke them before the end of the day. So that was a balancing act for the rest of the 4 years where I would, how do I politely say, no, I'm not going to participate. I want to film. And if I don't film, we're not going to have a film. But at the same time, that was the most, it was the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life is getting to do all these things. For example, once I showed up, he picked me up at the plane at the airport and he said, okay, I got some stuff for you to do. And I was like, well, what? And he's like, I want you to go down to the morgue and pick up my cousin. And I want you to take the body over to the church. And then I want you to take her out of the cardboard box. And I want you to help make the coffin. And then I want you to go to the cemetery and get the jackhammer out. And I want you to help dig the grave. And then I want you to wrangle up some of the young people to help you dig the grave. I would be doing that kind of stuff. And I broke my toe with the jackhammer and then I had to go to the hospital. And then I thought, well, how do I get back over to the cemetery to film? And that's why the film took 5 years to make, is because I was skinning seals and digging graves and smoking salmon. But that's why it's the kind of film that I wanted to make, where it really is, it comes from these things naturally happening and me filming them and lyrically trying to piece it together. And not based on questions I ask, but based on, the activities happening around.
Garrett, do you want to talk about your film and where it came from?
Sure. Thanks, Greg. Hey, everybody. Sorry I'm late. It's really nice to be here and hear about Jonathan's film. Lynn's film, I got to see a few months ago. Really enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of your films, hopefully this week. I live in Boulder, Colorado, and I'm the producer of Welcome Strangers. My wife is the director. We made a film about a woman named Sarah Jackson in Denver, who for the last 9 years has been greeting immigrants as they're released from a ICE detention center in Aurora, just outside of Denver. And she started out greeting them and inviting them back to her apartment, which she got an apartment across the street from this detention center because she realized people were being released and they had nowhere to go. They didn't know what to do. They're unceremoniously just let out the back door and said, they're told, show up for your court date in a year, whatever. They don't know. They know somebody in the US, but it's usually not in Denver. So they have to figure out how to get there. Anyway, it's grown and now there's hundreds of active volunteers. It's called Casa De Paz. They give them food and clothing and shelter and help get them on a bus or a plane to be reunited with their family and friends. And she's a really inspiring person. And of course, the work they do is incredibly necessary and also inspiring. So that's what we're hoping to do with the film, is move people's hearts and minds and increase awareness about this gap really in our immigration system, and also give people tools to make a difference and make a change.
Can I ask Garrett? First of all, I think it's a great film, and I've had the opportunity to see it a couple of times, which is really nice.
Thanks.
But I'm wondering, now that our immigration policy is hopefully changing, how do you feel that the film fits in to the kind of the conversation and the planning for the future?
Yeah, I think it remains to be seen. I'm still figuring it out. I'm still trying to listen to the experts. I think things will get better, but let's remember, Sarah started this organization while Obama was president. And some of you may know Obama had a nickname, Deporter in Chief. So this is not just Trump. It certainly got worse under Trump. And a lot of the things that Republicans did under that administration just, I feel, were just mean, and they just wanted to make it really, really hard for immigrants. And our film, the three immigrant guests in our film are asylum seekers, and that's a lot of what Casa De Paz sees is these are legal immigrants. They've presented themselves in the United States and said, I'm being persecuted at home, and I'm afraid that I'm going to die and be killed there. So can you help me? And there's a whole process, of course, for that. And the United States has a long tradition going back to World War II of welcoming asylum seekers and refugees. And under Trump, that those policies, I think the intent of those policies changed, and it became really hard. It feels like the Biden administration certainly wants to reverse a lot of those policies. I just don't know. And honestly, I don't know. And I'm not up enough on what their current actions are and what's going on to really comment on it. But I think this need is always going to be there until something really, really changes. So, and Sarah doesn't see, she still sees a need, and she's actually saving money to buy, for a while she's saving money to buy a house, but now she wants to buy 3 houses. Currently they rent, but they've gotten a lot of support. And so she's saving to actually buy them and not have a mortgage and really have permanent places for immigrant guests to be welcomed.
Devin, do you want to talk about your film, your experiences in making?
Yeah. I would love to. Devin Tao, director, producer, who's on top, narrated by George Takei. And our film is about these 4 courageous LGBTQ plus members of the community. It's about their figurative and emotional obstacles that they've had to overcome. And it's set against us climbing Mount Hood. We spent a year training and across, elevation gyms, with oxygen deprivation. We train on snow. We train at the rock gym. And so their personal stories are interwoven along the slow 5-mile climb, I guess this way, 5-mile climb the mountain, starting at 1 a.m., which is called the Alpine Start. And I was very lucky. I'm a quick tangent. I'm really a narrative filmmaker, but it's my first feature, and I thought it was much easier and cheaper, more affordable to do a doc instead of a narrative as the first feature. And so I picked a really easy topic of climbing a mountain with 3 of the 4 first-time mountaineers and myself. I've never climbed, but it was definitely a very, it was an amazing metaphor. It was like a great reminder that life is really a marathon. It's not a sprint. I don't know if there are any mountaineers on the phone or on the call, but mountaineering is like hiking really slowly up a mountain in the dark. That's what mountaineering is. So I think I'm not really made up that way. You know, I'm more of a like, hey, let's get it all done. And, you know, so I think it was just like a reality check that things never happen as fast as you want it to. Things take a super long time. It's uncertain if you're going to get there. And you're going to have a lot of obstacles along the way. But eventually you do get to the top, and eventually it does work out. And one of the huge questions we ask about the film is, what does being on top mean to you? Like, what does who's on top mean to you, right? And so there is this double entendre element to it, which is really funny. But it's fascinating to hear all four people kind of define it in their own way. And one of my favorite responses is, it's actually not about getting to the top. It's about the process of getting up there. And I think just like shifting the conversation and shifting the dialogue completely. So yeah, it was great making it, and I'm in the process of hopefully we can shoot in November, my first feature narrative. That's a thriller. But yeah, it was an amazing project, and I hope you all get to watch it.
What other, yeah. Sorry, Tad's play. Are you a filmmaker, Tads?
Yes, actually, I have a film out there entitled Sacred Reich, live at the Wackenfest in Germany through Metal Blade Records. And I'm actually currently working on a film right now. I've got a rough draft of it done. Basically, it's called Phoenix Rising. And what happened was I found myself in the Phoenix, Arizona area, and I opened up an internet radio station and was mixing unsigned bands with national acts, and it really took off. And I started booking my own shows. I started booking huge festivals and working with some of the biggest names in the music industry. So what I did was I filmed all of it. And I've Anvil, Megadeth, Head PE, OTEP, the Funk Junkies, you name the bands, Chester from Bennington, from Linkin Park, Brian Posehn, the actor. I've got a lot of people in this film, and I've been in the process of editing it all winter now. And it's basically a film about what it takes to make it into the industry, from the bands that already have made it into the industry, as well as the unsigned bands out there struggling, trying to break into the industry. So I'm interviewing, you know, all of these people, the bassist of Megadeth, the guitarists of bands and stuff, asking, you know, if you had advice for somebody out there trying to break into the industry, or, you know, what was your big break? What was the craziest thing that's happened while you were on tour? So it's basically kind of an informative documentary about, like I said, what it takes to make it into the music industry, from the unsigned bands trying to do so to the bands that already have. So I've got a rough draft right now. I've been working with all the sound. And my first film, actually, Sacred Reich, live at the Wackenfest, was edited through Metal Blade Records. So it was a lot easier when you're handing over your film footage and going, okay, here, you know, it's what I got. And they edited everything. So now I'm doing this one myself, which it's been a challenge, but I've been working on it, filming all of this for the last years in the industry, and now I've been editing it all winter. So I'm really excited about it, because it's basically, if you've ever seen like decline of the Western civilization, Penelope Spheris, I believe, did that. It's basically kind of the same concept. So thanks. I appreciate
Sure.
being involved in this meeting today.
Yeah. Do we have other filmmakers that I haven't talked to? So, I mean, I guess I just had one question for the filmmakers. Like, when you're doing a documentary, what makes you decide to do a short documentary or a feature-length documentary? Is it just you see where the project ends up? I mean, I know most documentaries, you have a ton of footage. So I'm just wondering where you decide to edit it down to.
For me, it
I-
just, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
For me, it just seemed like from the beginning it needed to be a feature because of the kind of content that was in it. It would be like there'd be something missing if it wasn't. So I kind of always envisioned it that way.
So I can answer from the other direction, which is as a filmmaker that's made only long form documentaries, I felt like that without, well, particularly without any funding in the beginning, that the idea of making a short was much more able to be, that I could do it a lot easier. And I was concerned about time because of my father's age. So I didn't want to wait to really get the funds. But I also think that to do a good short is also really difficult because of the story arc, that as well as to do a feature. I mean, it's all about story, and it's all about how you construct the story. And I think both definitely have their, advantages, but I don't, for Eddie's world, if I had made it a feature, it would have been more of, it would have totally changed the way I told the story and the format. So I was really glad to tackle it as a short.
You brought up an interesting thing about funding, and I'm just curious for all the filmmakers, like when you're doing a documentary, where does your funding come from? Is it mostly friends and family, or?
In my case, the art dealer who owned the copyright to Earl Biss art, it was a benefit to him to be a sponsor. So he covered a good amount of the expenses, but all of my time was purely speculation. But I was very grateful to have that because it gets expensive to travel, even, in my case. So that just was a fortunate thing. I think fundraising is very, very difficult. If it weren't, for that interest from that guy. Oh, sorry, my phone keeps ringing. Oh, somebody else talk.
Excuse me. I was going to say, luckily I was in a position to be able to self-fund my project. I definitely did get other support. There was a tiny bit of friends and family donations. Had a lot of corporate in-kind sponsorships, which is amazing. And then I did get a Oregon State a film office incentive. So I don't know if anyone's looking for state incentives, but Oregon's one of the most generous in the country. So that's something I highly recommend you researching if you need state funding to help complete your projects. But yeah. So it's yeah. Oh, and then a tiny bit of grants.
For Welcome Strangers, we've been saving money from other, from like real work, real jobs. And then we did get a great grant from Telluride Mountain Film that helped out. And now we're sharing the film with community organizations and doing partnerships with groups to raise money and awareness for those groups. And we take a percentage of that in arrangement with those filmmakers, and any donations that we get directly to our website get split 50-50 between Casa De Paz, the organization in the film, and our outreach efforts.
Are you guys doing an impact campaign, Garrett?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of brings up an interesting question. So, you know, you obviously have passions on your subjects, but where do you, you know, what do you want out of your documentary? I mean, obviously you want people to see it, but as Garrett was talking about, you know, you're trying to make an impact on, you know, and talk about that story. I mean, what about the rest of you all? What, you know, what was your intention in making the film?
Mine basically, like I said, was just for the unsigned bands out there trying to get a record deal, what it takes from the club owners aspects to the security to other musicians who've already made it to just what it takes, the advice from people who've already made it into the business is what you need to do, what's the steps, how flyering shows, radio play, promo packs, demo packs. It's basically kind of a informative documentary about what it takes. And like you were saying earlier, how do you take a film and try to get, when I was done, I was looking at a timeline of 8 hours worth of footage that was just, I basically took everything, chopped it down into an hour and 45 minutes. And it's just clip of just informative of stuff, live performances in studios and stuff with a lot of these big bands, just talking with them. And that was my whole idea, was just to get it out there to, these kids in high school want to become rock stars, to find out, well, exactly, becoming a rock star, you're not making a lot of money. That's why you have $45 t-shirts at festivals and stuff. That's where a lot of these bands make their money. The rest of it goes into touring and such. Merchandise is basically where a lot of these big bands make their money.
I think my incentive from an acting standpoint, I'm tired of going on all these auditions for New York City cops. So I'm like, how can we shake this up? Because all the actors I know too, you're struggling, all these auditions, rejection. So it's like, how can I make a character that can show my range finally with my own material instead of somebody else's material? But it's funny, for Tad's Place too, we had a lot of music in it too, the soundtrack. These few bands from Brooklyn that were pretty big. So it's funny, talk about the music side too. I had to go through their record labels and all that. So that was interesting. But yeah, definitely from acting standpoint, just was tired of going out for other people's stuff.
Well, for me, I'm interested in distribution, educational distribution for Eddie's World, for younger people within the whole invention education curriculum, and kind of STEAM, which I think the film works well with, as well as reaching out to a senior community, and then hopefully to end up being able to have these kind of conversations between younger people and older people, using toys as a vehicle to, start that conversation. And then also, of course, as a legacy project for my family.
What I'm interested in with documentaries is, it's going to sound really like a cliche, but I think it's one thing that's needed in our world is for more people to just wonder what it's like to be someone else. And every film I make, that's really where I start. I want the audience to think, what would it be like to be this person? And so for me, I've always been kind of morally outraged about the way that Native Alaskans are totally pretty much ignored by the rest of the world. And I just feel that if with climate change, we can hear scientific data all day long, and that will not make us change as humans, how we live. And see, the irony is I make a lot of those scientific type shows for my clients where it's about the science. But I feel like we're not going to change unless we see it, climate change, through the eyes of the human experience and what the humans are going through. And that's how we are built, really. We're wired that way, to care about people, not abstract spaces out there that we've never been to. And most people who watch my film will never go to the Arctic or will never have been there, but they can relate to a grandfather who wants the best for his grandchildren and who wants to honor his own grandfather who taught him what he knows. So in terms of what I wanted, it's very kind of simple. I just want the audience to empathize with the people in the film. Is that so much to ask?
Go ahead, Gadra.
I really agree with Jonathan, because actually I was already ready to tell almost the same, like the initial, like above all, for me, filmmaking is a tool to know the world. And not even talking specifically about The Jump or about the previous films I made, I see it as a unique opportunity just to understand how this life is constructed on, just to get to know each other. So this is like my primary instinct motivation as an artist. And what concerns The Jump, I was born, it was still Soviet Union, and I was 10 when my country became free. And actually, I will never forget this feeling. And it was like all this independence movement, all our revolution and everything just turning from Soviet society just into another society. And this transformation really left a very huge imprint inside me. And this subject of freedom, because I remember the sweet word of freedom. And for me, it looked like, oh my God, freedom is just a total paradise. And it was really and by making this film, I was just trying to understand what was the life before I was born. And I'm really just interested, keen in the dramatic fates that happened in these totalitarian times, and last but not least, because my character also has this American dream, and his American dream, it was two things. It was always cruelty of society, cruelty of life, but what was he running away? Occupation, deportation, but at the same time, he had this rose image, what it means, America. And I really remember so vividly from my childhood. It looked like, America, it looked like a promised paradise. And even the bubble gums, because we Soviet kids, we were dreaming about American bubble gums. We couldn't make like bubbles with our Soviet. It was not, you just chewing, but no bubbles. And if somebody good by any chance like a bubble chewing gum, oh my God, you can make a bubble. So for me, all these memories from childhood, I can tell you very openly, just to understand how we were different. Like, it's just now unbelievable to realize how the world was divided. Like, it was between the Iron Curtain, it was one life and then another life. And we were locked, we couldn't go out, but we were just dreaming to go out. We were just dreaming to know the world, what was behind that Iron Curtain. And everything what was from America, it was precious. And when I was 7 years old or 6 years old, from somewhere I got like a can of Fanta can. I was so proud. I was going outside the street and I felt like, like drinking. And of course, one day this lemonade was over. So I was pouring a Soviet lemonade and was still going into the street because I have this can of Fanta. So all these small things, they look like an anecdotes maybe for Western audience, but for us, it was an entire life in which you can see all the absurdities of closed society, of not having So yeah, that's for me, because this is for me it's film about freedom and the price of freedom at the end, as we see. But even now, even my character, maybe he was dreaming about a palms and to buy a Grundig, but but freedom is also a simple thing. It's also like to travel where you want, to listen to the music what you want. It's not always about only like big. It's also about like an everyday life. And for me, that's why I was doing this movie, just to understand and just trying to understand more and until I can still talk to these people, until we are still alive, until I can hear this first impression. And of course, I mean, I can talk forever about this subject and all this my childhood memories. So about this other world. Yeah.
Well, I think that's why documentaries are so fascinating, because they do show, different people and different lives. And Durango is a very strong documentary town. People, our audiences love watching the documentaries just for that reason, because it gives you a insight into someone else's life, whether they're a toy maker, whether they're trying to, escape the Iron Curtain, or, whether they're climbing mountains in, South America, or, so I think that's why documentaries are so fascinating. I mean, we could continue this conversation. I think, it's been a bit, and I know some of us have to go back to work. I don't know if there's any final comments or questions people want to ask each other. Or, I wish we could, all be in person, and then you could, meet each other on the street and have these conversations, or come to the Filmmaker Lounge at night, and continue talking and stuff. So, I'm glad we're able to still sort of do a semi, thing in person.
We do have on the Durango Independent Film Festival Facebook page, we do have a group that is just for filmmakers, which if you guys aren't part of that group, you can ask to be admitted, or I can send you an invite again if you missed it the first time. But that's a great place for you guys to just openly talk to each other as well.
I really want to thank the Durango Film Festival staff, because what you put together is really smooth and engaging, and I just thank you very, very much. Glad to be a part of this.
It's been a learning process for a lot, especially for Cindy and Joni, doing all the tech stuff through Eventive, and it's been a different year for us, but we're just happy to have all the films, and having everyone meet each other and sharing your work with us. So
it's completely awesome. I can't wait to watch everybody's film right after this.
It's funny because I was like, oh, am I really going to watch a lot of films? And then last night after the meet and greet, I ended up staying up till 11 o'clock. I watched 3 different programs. Normally I would be watching films all day, but now that we're not really in person, but I watched 3 full programs, and it was great. It made me realize why we're involved in the film festival. So, well, thanks for joining us this morning. We've got more coffee talks throughout the week, other genres and stuff. So feel free to join in, and hopefully you can meet some other filmmakers. Go to the Facebook page and enjoy the films.
Yeah, this is great. I'm really stoked to see everyone's film. Yeah. Like you said, the other kind of virtual festivals, it's like you don't really get like that incentive to connect with people in your films if you haven't really gone through something like this. And like now that I've heard people talk about their film, I'm like, oh shit, I gotta spend all weekend watching films. Like clear the calendar, let's do it.
Yeah,
I agree. There's been such a disconnect with all the other festivals, so this is fantastic. Just to talk,
Yeah, it's
thanks
really
again.
great.
That's one of the things we always prided our festival on, is getting filmmakers together. We have parties every night, which is why we're doing the Quarantinis. We had the Filmmaker Lounge, which Cindy was always in charge of, and so we wanted to continue that atmosphere as much as we could. And, we want you all to come back next year when we will be live. Well, thanks for joining us this morning. Reach out if you have any questions, if we can help you with anything. But we're
Gotta
excited
taste
to have you.
Got to taste the wine and beer next year if we
Yes.
come in person. Wine look good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.